Welcome to the Captain's Table. I'm Captain Sham, and I want to help you run Star Trek role-playing games that really feel like Star Trek. So we're talking here about tones and themes, right? The things that make a Star Trek game fit in with what is normal and usual for Star Trek. Okay? Now, previously we discussed improv, and we said you could do whatever you like, and that's great, that makes a game fun. But it does mean that you now are at risk of running off in a weird direction and making it feel like Star Trek. Okay, so we want to discuss what should Star Trek be like, so that you've got, as we said, a skin around the outside of your game. Not of hard limits, right? These are not barriers for your players to bash against, but just sort of an indication of what areas they should be thinking in. Okay, so the tone of Star Trek generally tends to be hopeful. It tends to be about humanity improving and the rest of the galaxy improving as well. It doesn't always have to be 100% optimistic. You can have an unhappy ending sometimes, but that's an exception, right? Your general flow should be optimistic and hopeful, and things should get better. When things go wrong, that's just to put some relief on everything else to show, well, this is why we want things to go better, because if they don't go better, the bad things happen. Okay, so it's not impossible to do it that way, but you gotta balance it out. You gotta manage it. Okay? When we get into specific themes, we need to be a bit careful about which Star Trek we mean, right? Because original series felt different from Next Generation. Original series felt different even from its closest relative, which is the animated series. The themes and the tones in those weren't identical. They did shift around a bit. As writers learned more, as directors got different ideas about how to present the stories, and then when you start getting into later 90s Trek, and then Abrams Trek, and even the newest stuff, Discovery and Picard, the themes of the show change around. They don't stay exactly consistent. The tone has definitely shifted around, but there are certain things that, for the most part, stay consistent. Right? Positive, hopeful stories, I think that's mostly stayed in place. And that's why I would say that's a good general tone to keep. Apart from that, I would say that there's also definitely a theme of science and rationality, right? Trying to understand the universe. But it's not we know best and therefore that's the end of it, what we say goes. It's exploration, right? It's researching things, it's trying to uncover new facts that were previously unknown, it's meeting new people and trying to learn from them. It's an open-minded rationality, and that's quite important. Right? So that's definitely something to incorporate into your games, is the idea that Star Trek is about going out and exploring, right? Not just knowing things and being smart. It's about being smart, but admitting that you're not the smartest, that you don't know everything, and that you want to go out and look for new stuff to find, to boldly go, you might even say. Then I would say that there's also a theme of diplomacy and mutual respect. The Federation doesn't like to start wars, doesn't like to have wars at all, really, and the exceptions to that are usually done for plot purposes. And one day I'll go on a long rant about that particular topic, but in general, I think it's very easy to agree that the Federation and Star Trek in general is anti-war. And there is a large Federation diplomatic corps. Starfleet officers are well versed in how to negotiate and come to peaceful resolutions rather than just killing everyone and taking what they want. Okay, they are not the Jem'Hadar. They are not the clunkiest of Klingons. They're not orcs, right? When you encounter some new worlds and new civilizations, the goal isn't to conquer them. The goal is to find out what they're like. This ties back with the exploration theme as well. But the main purpose of meeting these new people is to make friends with them. And obviously the GM needs to subvert that, the GM needs to put some conflict in there, make it more challenging, because in the real world it's challenging to be friends with everyone. But is it worthwhile? Roddenberry says so, Star Trek says so, I say so, and therefore it's a good end goal for your games, right? Try to be friends with people even when it's challenging. Making it challenging makes a more interesting game. Trying to get there anyway makes it a great game. Then I would say the other major theme of Star Trek is social justice, the idea that everybody has certain rights, everybody deserves to be treated well. Exactly how that's expressed varies a bit over time depending on the series, but it's definitely undeniably part of the whole franchise, right? And that varies a bit depending on on the limits of your focus, right? If you're just looking at the Federation, that's nice and clear. Everybody in the Federation is pretty well equal, and everybody gets paid, and well, not paid. Economy of the Federation deserves its own complicated video. That's a long ramble on its own. But everybody gets supplied, let's rather say, with the necessities of life, and nobody has to struggle. Everybody does fine, right? Nobody gathers huge hordes of wealth like some stereotypical fantasy dragon. Everybody does okay with just enough. And everybody has pretty well equal rights. There are no subclasses in the Federation, except again for some weird, unusual exceptions. And usually those are written in specifically to give a story some conflict. And that conflict is then, in the TV series, usually resolved by the end of the episode so that it's not a problem again in future. Um, and again, exceptions, funny little exceptions, not the norm. Okay, so that's what you're driving for. There is trying to make things better, not just for an elite few, but for everyone. Right? Outside of the Federation, I think the Prime Directive, again, very complicated topic to discuss, that deserves its own long ramble as well. But the underlying idea of it is that low technology worlds, those who aren't yet spacefaring, also deserve a fair chance, right? They shouldn't be forced into things that they didn't ask for by outsiders coming in with their own ideas. They should get their own chance to develop in their own way, how they want, and not be told what to do. And that fits also with the idea of everybody having equal rights and equal opportunities. Beyond that, the Federation's major neighbors, the Romulans and the Klingons and the Cardassians and Ferengi and so on, it's, again, more complicated with them. The Federation tries to be good with them. We said they've got that whole diplomatic corps who try to make friends with everyone. I think an underlying reason for that is the assumption that Klingons deserve rights as much as humans and Vulcans and everyone else. Getting Klingons to accept that is a challenge, and from the GM's point of view, it's a useful challenge, right? Getting peace is a lovely goal. Figuring out how to make that work in practice gives the players an interesting challenge. And sometimes they should fail at that challenge just to show that it's a real serious challenge. But your ultimate long-term story arc could be that eventually they make a real difference, right? And then you can show it was worth it. Here is what all your struggle was for. Yes, it was a lot of work, but look, now people aren't killing each other, which is always nice. I think there are all sorts of other themes that you can explore. Science fiction is hugely varied. There's very few limits to science fiction. You can bend it in pretty much any direction that suits your own game, and that again works very well with improv. But I think it's useful to have those few core principles, your tone and your themes that you're going to run the game within, as a sort of guidance of what will work for you, and what your players should be thinking as well. Right? Not because they have to follow the rules because it's the rules, but because if they want to run or if they want to play in a Star Trek game, they presumably also appreciate Star Trek and would enjoy fitting in with the norms of Starfleet and the norms of the Federation. And this gives them their opportunity to figure out how they would get those norms in place if it was up to them. If they want to be violent and cruel and selfish and murder hobos, maybe it's not the game for them. Maybe they should consider something else. If they do want to play a Star Trek game, the little nudges that I said the GM should give to less experienced players, these are some good nudges to give. Just to remind them where the morals of the setting are most likely to nudge them. And then remains their choice what to do, but at least they should be thinking in that direction.